The sun had barely cracked the horizon on that fateful morning, casting a warm, golden glow over the battle-scarred landscape. The temperature was a brisk 48 degrees Fahrenheit, with a gentle breeze carrying the sweet, earthy scent of damp soil and the acrid smell of gunpowder. The air was crisp, with a hint of moisture that hinted at a potential storm brewing on the horizon. As the light grew, it illuminated the ruins of a once thriving village, now reduced to rubble and ash by the relentless onslaught of war. In the distance, the sound of clanking metal and muttered conversations carried on the wind, growing louder with each passing moment. A column of soldiers, clad in worn, khaki uniforms and clutching an assortment of firearms, emerged from the mist-shrouded trees. They moved with a sense of purpose, their boots kicking up small clouds of dust as they trudged through the desolate landscape. Each soldier was laden with an impressive array of gear, from the standard-issue M1 Garand rifles to the more specialized M1919 Browning machine guns, carefully maintained and oiled to ensure smooth operation. As the soldiers drew closer, the details of their equipment became more apparent. The M1 Garands, with their distinctive en-bloc clip design, were slung over the shoulders of the infantrymen, while the machine gunners carefully cradled their M1919 Brownings, the guns, slender, air-cooled barrels glinting in the growing light. The soldiers' helmets, stamped with the iconic USA RMY star, sat atop their heads, some bearing the scars of previous battles in the form of dents and scratches. Each man's web gear was carefully arranged, with canteens, first aid kits, and ammunition pouches precisely positioned to facilitate quick access. The commander, a grizzled veteran with a rugged, weathered face and a distinctive, sharp jawline, led the column with a confident air. His eyes, narrowed against the brightening light, scanned the surroundings with a practiced intensity, searching for any sign of enemy activity. A pair of binoculars, hanging from a leather strap around his neck, bounced against his chest as he walked, the lenses glinting with a faint, reflected light. At his hip, a holstered Colt M1911 pistol seemed to be a constant companion, its presence a reassuring weight that spoke of countless hours spent in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. The soldiers, arrayed behind their commander, moved with a practiced, almost choreographed precision, their movements honed by months of training in combat. Each man knew his role. From the scouts who flanked the column, their eyes scanning the horizon for signs of danger, to the radio man hunched over his SCR-300 radio set, carefully monitoring the airwaves for any sign of enemy transmission. As they marched, the sound of their boots, the creaking of their web gear, and the occasional, muttered conversation created a sense of normalcy, a sense of routine that belied the brutal reality of their situation. Masio, the left of the column, a small, rugged hill rose from the landscape, its surface pockmarked with the scars of previous battles. The hill, dubbed Objective Alpha by the military strategists, was the focus of the day's mission, a key stronghold that controlled access to the surrounding countryside. The commander's eyes flicked toward the hill, his mind racing with the intricacies of the impending battle. He knew that the enemy, dug in and well entrenched, would not give up their position without a fierce fight. The commander's thoughts turned to the artillery support, scheduled to commence at 0600 hours, a barrage of high-explosive shells designed to soften up the enemy defenses and pave the way for the infantry assault. As the column drew closer to the base of the hill, the tension grew, palpable and almost tangible. The soldiers, sensing the approaching battle, instinctively checked their gear, a final, reassuring touch that spoke of their professionalism and training. The commander, his eyes locked on the hill, slowed the column's pace, his hand rising in a silent signal to halt. The soldiers froze, their ears straining to pick up any sign of enemy movement, their eyes scanning the hill's surface for the telltale signs of enemy activity. In the silence, the sound of a solitary bird, its melodic trill carrying on the wind, seemed out of place, a jarring reminder of a world beyond the brutal, war-torn landscape. The commander's voice, low and even, cut through the stillness, his words a calm, measured counterpoint to the growing sense of anticipation. "All right, men, let's move out. Stay sharp, and watch your flanks. We don't know what's waiting for us up there." As the sun began to set on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos, the commander of the Allied forces, General Thompson, surveyed the landscape with a keen eye. His troops, a mix of seasoned veterans and fresh recruits, were arrayed across the terrain, each unit carefully positioned to maximize their unique strengths. To the north, the 1st Battalion, led by the indefatigable Colonel Jameson, held the high ground, their artillery pieces trained on the enemy's left flank. The 2nd Battalion, under the command of the cunning Colonel Lee, had taken up a defensive position to the south, their riflemen nestled behind a screen of abatis, ready to unleash a withering hail of bullets upon any foe who dared to approach. Meanwhile, the 3rd Battalion, a brigade of light infantry led by the dashing Colonel Wilson, had been dispatched to the east, where they were tasked with outflanking the enemy and striking at their vulnerable rear. This maneuvers required a delicate balance of speed and stealth, as the 3rd Battalion had to navigate treacherous terrain, avoiding the enemy's scouts and pickets, all while maintaining a swift pace to reach their objective before the enemy could react. To achieve this, Colonel Wilson had divided his brigade into 3 columns, each consisting of 2 companies of infantry, with a small detachment of cavalry screening their advance. The left column, led by Captain Lewis, took a narrow, winding path through the dense forest, using the trees for cover as they moved to outflank the enemy's right. The center column, under the command of Captain Hall, followed a more direct route, marching along a dirt road that led straight to the enemy's rear. The right column, led by Captain Jackson, took a circuitous route, looping around to the north, where they could attack the enemy's left flank, potentially catching them off guard. As the 3rd Battalion moved into position, the 1st and 2nd Battalions began to stir, their troops preparing for the impending battle. The 1st Battalion, with its artillery pieces at the ready, commenced a bombardment of the enemy's left flank, firing cannonballs and shells into the densely packed ranks of the enemy infantry. The enemy, taken aback by the sudden onslaught, stumbled backward in disarray, their lines wavering as they struggled to regroup. Seizing the opportunity, the 2nd Battalion, with its riflemen and skirmishers, launched a fierce assault on the enemy's center, pouring a deadly rain of bullets into the enemy's midst. The enemy, already reeling from the artillery barrage, now found themselves facing a new and even more pressing threat, as the 2nd Battalion's infantry closed in for the kill. As the battle raged on, the 3rd Battalion, now in position to the east, launched its own attack, striking at the enemy's exposed rear. The enemy, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the 3rd Battalion, stumbled backward in shock, their lines collapsing as they desperately tried to respond to the new threat. The 3rd Battalion, sensing victory within their grasp, pressed their advantage, driving forward with reckless abandon, their bayonets glinting in the fading light as they cut down any enemy soldier who dared to stand in their way. The enemy, now beset on all sides, stumbled backward in disarray, their army on the brink of collapse. The Allied forces, sensing the tide of battle turning in their favor, redoubled their efforts, pouring all their might into the fray. The 1st Battalion's artillery continued to pound the enemy's left flank, while the 2nd Battalion's infantry cut down any enemy soldier who dared to stand in their way. The 3rd Battalion, meanwhile, had broken through the enemy's rear, and was now chasing down the fleeing enemy troops, cutting them down without mercy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a dark and bloody shadow, the enemy's army was on the verge of collapse. Their lines had been shattered, their troops were in full retreat, and their commanders were either dead or captured. The Allied forces, victorious but exhausted, surveyed the carnage-strewn landscape, their troops cheering and weeping in equal measure, as they realized that the battle was finally won. The cost had been high, with many brave soldiers fallen on both sides, but in the end, it was the Allied forces who emerged triumphant, their tactics and training proving superior to those of their foes. In the aftermath of the battle, General Thompson, his face weary but triumphant, rode onto the battlefield, surveying the carnage and destruction that lay before him. He knew that the battle had been won, but at what cost? The enemy's army had been shattered, but the Allied forces had also suffered heavy losses. As he looked out upon the sea of wounded and dead, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and sadness, knowing that the bravery and sacrifice of his troops had been the key to their victory. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over, and General Thompson knew that there would be many more battles to come, each one a test of the mettle and resolve of his troops. As the night wore on, the Allied forces set about the grim task of tending to the wounded and burying the dead. The battlefield, once a scene of chaos and carnage, was now a place of somber reflection, as the soldiers came to terms with the true cost of their victory. The enemy's army, once a proud and formidable force, now lay shattered and broken, its soldiers either dead, wounded, or captured. The Allied forces, meanwhile, had emerged victorious, but at a great cost, their troops exhausted, injured, and mourning the loss of their fallen comrades. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over, and the Allied forces knew that they would have to regroup, recharge, and prepare for the next challenge. as they continued their long and bloody march towards ultimate victory. As the battalion advanced, the terrain shifted from dense forests to open fields, providing a clear line of sight for the artillery units. The M109A7 Paladin self-propelled howitzers, with their 155mm M284 cannons, were able to unleash a barrage of high-explosive shells upon the enemy positions. Each shell, weighing approximately 100 pounds, was capable of delivering a devastating blast radius of up to 50 meters. The howitzers, advanced fire control systems, including the IGFS, Integrate Ground Fire System, and the A3, Advanced Artillery Architecture, enabled the gunners to calculate and adjust their aim with precision, ensuring a high degree of accuracy. Meanwhile, the infantry units, armed with the M4A1 carbines and M249 machine guns, pushed forward, utilizing cover and concealment to navigate the exposed terrain. The M4A1, with its 14.5-inch barrel and 5.56 by 45mm NATO cartridge, offered a high rate of fire and moderate recoil, making it an ideal choice for close-quarters combat. The M249, chambered in the same 5.56 by 45mm NATO caliber, provided a higher volume of suppressive fire, allowing the squads to pin down enemy positions and facilitate the advancement of their comrades. As the battle raged on, the air support arrived in the form of AH-64E Apache helicopters. Their distinct silhouetted a welcome sight for the ground troops. The Apaches, armed with 30mm M230 cannons, 2.75-inch rockets, and AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, began to engage enemy strongpoints, their rotors whipping up clouds of dust and debris. The helicopters, advanced sensors and targeting systems, including the ANASQ-170 targeting sight and the ANAPG-78 longbow fire control radar, enabled the pilots to detect and engage targets with precision, even in the midst of intense combat. The chaos of battle was palpable, with the cacophony of explosions, gunfire, and screams filling the air. The soldiers' senses were overwhelmed, their training and discipline the only factors preventing chaos from descending into anarchy. Amidst the mayhem, individual acts of bravery and selflessness emerged, as soldiers risked their lives to rescue wounded comrades, or provided covering fire to facilitate the evacuation of casualties. Logistically, the battle presented significant challenges, particularly in regards to supply chain management and casualty evacuation. The M1133 medical evacuation vehicle, with its armored design and advanced life support equipment, played a critical role in extracting wounded personnel from the battlefield. The vehicle's rear ramp and hydraulic lift system enabled medical personnel to rapidly load and unload stretcher-bound patients, while the onboard medical equipment, including defibrillators, ventilators, and transfusion equipment, allowed for the provision of critical care en route to medical facilities. As the fight continued, the importance of tactical flexibility became increasingly apparent. The ability of units to adapt to changing circumstances, to adjust their plans and tactics in response to evolving enemy actions, was crucial in maintaining momentum and securing key objectives. This adaptability was facilitated by the widespread use of advanced communication systems, including satellite radios, tactical networking equipment, and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. The MQ-1C Grey Eagle UAV, with its synthetic aperture radar and high-resolution video sensors, provided real-time intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance (ISR) support, enabling commanders to assess the battlefield and adjust their plans accordingly. The integration of multiple branches and assets was also a critical factor in the battle's progression. The coordination between infantry, artillery, air support, and logistics units allowed for a cohesive and effective application of force, as each component played to its strengths and compensated for the weaknesses of others. This synergy enabled the coalition forces to overwhelm the enemy, pushing them back and securing key terrain features. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ravaged landscape, the battle showed no signs of abating. The soldiers, exhausted and spent, dug in for the night, their positions a testament to the ferocity of the combat. The enemy, though battered and bruised, still maintained a presence, their resolve unbroken. The outcome of the battle, though leaning in favor of the coalition, remained far from certain, as the two sides steeled themselves for another day of brutal and unrelenting warfare. The night ahead would be filled with the sounds of sporadic gunfire, the occasional explosion, and the endless, gnawing uncertainty that define the reality of modern combat. As the cacophony of war reached a fever pitch, the very fabric of the battlefield seemed to unravel, like the threads of a tapestry torn asunder by some malevolent force. The air was heavy with the stench of sweat, smoke, and the acrid tang of explosives, a noxious miasma that clung to every surface like a malignant entity. The ground trembled beneath the feet of the combatants, as if the earth itself was convulsing in agony, unable to bear the weight of the carnage that was being unleashed upon it. The soldiers on both sides were mere puppets, their strings pulled by the unseen hands of fate, as they clashed in a frenzy of steel and fire. The sound of gunfire was a constant, a deafening barrage that threatened to consume all in its path, like a raging tempest that would not abate. The cries of the wounded and the dying added to the discordant symphony, their anguished screams echoing through the chaos like the mournful dirges of the damned. In the midst of this bedlam, a young lieutenant, his face smeared with grime and his eyes blazing with a fierce determination, rallied his troops with a series of curt, barked orders. His voice was like a clarion call, cutting through the din of battle and imbuing his comrades with a sense of purpose, a sense of direction in a world gone mad. As one, they charged forward, their rifles at the ready, their hearts afire with a fierce and unyielding resolve. The enemy lines wavered, like a reed in the wind, as the lieutenant's company tore into them with a ferocity that was both beautiful and terrifying to behold. The clash of steel on steel, the crunch of bone and the splintering of wood, all combined to create a sense of primal, visceral intensity, a maelstrom of chaos that threatened to engulf all in its path. The lieutenant's sword sliced through the melee, its blade a blur of motion as it bit deep into the flesh of his foes, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. And yet, despite the carnage, despite the chaos, there was a sense of symphony to the battle, a sense of rhythm and flow that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. The ebb and flow of the combatants, the give and take of the conflict, all seemed to follow a twisted, macabre dance, a dance of death that would not end until one side or the other emerged victorious. The lieutenant's company was a cog in this grand machine, a small but vital part of a larger, more complex whole, and as they fought, they knew that they were not just fighting for their lives, but for the very fate of the world. As the battle raged on, the lieutenant's senses began to blur, his perception of time and space growing distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. The world around him narrowed, until all that existed was the fight, the clash of steel on steel, the cry of the wounded and the dying. He was a conduit for the fury of war, a vessel for the primal, visceral energy that drove men to kill and to die. His sword arm rose and fell, like a metronome marking out the rhythm of the conflict, as he cut his way through the enemy lines, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The enemy was a faceless, formless mass, a tide of humanity that seemed to stretch on forever, like a dark, endless sea. But the lieutenant was undaunted, his heart afire with a fierce and unyielding resolve, his spirit unbroken by the horrors that surrounded him. He was a rock, a bulwark against which the waves of chaos crashed and broke, a beacon of hope in a world gone mad. And as he fought, he knew that he was not alone, that there were others like him, others who were driven by the same fierce and unyielding determination, the same primal, visceral energy that drove men to kill and to die. The battle was a crucible, a furnace in which the very soul of humanity was being tested, refined, and purified. The lieutenant and his comrades were the raw material, the base metal that was being forged into something new, something stronger and more resilient. They were the instruments of war, the tools of destruction, and yet, they were also the embodiment of hope, the beacon of light, in a world gone day. As they fought, they knew that they were not just fighting for their lives, but for the very future of humanity, for the chance to emerge from the crucible of war, tempered and strengthened, like steel in the fire. The hours ticked by, each one an eternity, as the battle raged on, unabated and unrelenting. The lieutenant's company was a small but vital part of the larger conflict, a conflict that seemed to stretch on forever, like a dark, endless tapestry. But the lieutenant was undaunted, his spirit unbroken, his heart afire with a fierce and unyielding resolve. He was a warrior, a soldier, a hero, and as he fought, he knew that he was not just fighting for himself, but for all those who had come before him, for all those who would come after him, for the very fabric of humanity itself. And then, in the midst of the chaos, in the heart of the maelstrom, there was a moment of clarity, a moment of perfect, crystalline clarity. The lieutenant's vision expanded, his perception of time and space growing clear and distinct, like a reflection in a still pond. He saw the battle, the conflict, the war, in all its twisted, macabre glory. And he knew, in that moment, that it was all just a small part of something much larger, something much more complex. He saw the threads of fate that connected all things, the delicate, gossamer web of causality that bound the universe together. And he knew, in that moment, that he was a part of it, a small but vital part of the grand tapestry of existence. The moment passed, and the lieutenant was once again engulfed by the chaos of battle, but he was changed, transformed by the clarity of that instant. He fought on, his sword arm rising and falling, like a metronome marking out the rhythm of the conflict. But he was no longer just a warrior, no longer just a soldier. He was a part of something greater, something larger, something that transcended the petty, mundane concerns of the battlefield. He was a thread in the web of fate, a strand in the delicate, gossamer tapestry of existence. And as he fought, he knew that he was not just fighting for himself, but for the very fabric of reality itself. The devastation was palpable as the dust settled, revealing a landscape transformed by the unrelenting barrage of firepower. The once pristine terrain was now scarred, pockmarked with craters, and littered with the detritus of war. The air reeked of smoke, sweat, and the acrid smell of burning metal and flesh. The survivors, dazed and disoriented, stumbled through the wreckage, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of hope. As the reality of the situation sank in, the casualty reports began to trickle in, each one a stark reminder of the human cost of war. The numbers were staggering, with countless lives lost and many more forever changed. The medical teams worked tirelessly, their skills pushed to the limit as they struggled to tend to the wounded. The cries of the injured filled the air pleas for help echoing through the desolate landscape. Individual stories of survival began to emerge, each one a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience. A young soldier, barely out of his teenage years, was found wandering the battlefield, his eyes vacant, his mind shattered by the trauma he had endured. He had lost his entire unit, his friends, his brothers, and was left alone to pick up the pieces of his shattered world. As he stumbled through the wreckage, he stumbled upon a small, tattered photograph, a reminder of the life he had left behind. The image of his family, smiling and happy, brought tears to his eyes, and for a moment, he forgot about the war, forgot about the pain, and forgot about the loss. Another soldier, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, was found buried under the rubble, his legs crushed, his body broken. As the medics worked to free him, he whispered stories of his comrades, of the men he had fought alongside, of the bonds they had formed, and of the memories they had shared. His voice was weak, but his spirit remained strong, a beacon of hope in a world torn apart by conflict. As he was finally freed from the wreckage, he gazed up at the sky, his eyes filled with a deep sense of sadness, and whispered a single word: "Why?" The commanding officer, a man who had led his troops with courage and distinction, was found sitting amidst the ruins, his head in his hands, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and grief. He had lost everything: his men, his mission, and his sense of purpose. As he looked up, his gaze met that of a young girl, no more than 10 years old, who had wandered onto the battlefield, searching for her family. Her eyes were wide with fear, her face smeared with tears, and her small body trembling with each breath. The officer's expression softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his, trying to offer what little comfort he could. The girl's story was one of tragedy, her family torn apart by the conflict, her home destroyed, and her sense of security shattered. She had been separated from her parents in the chaos, and now, she was left alone, adrift in a world that seemed determined to destroy her. As the officer held her hand, he felt a deep sense of responsibility, a sense of duty, to protect this innocent child from the horrors of war. Together, they sat in silence, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a faint, golden light. The days that followed were a blur of activity, as the survivors worked to rebuild, to recover, and to come to terms with the trauma they had endured. The wounded were evacuated, the dead were buried, and the living were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The officers worked tirelessly, coordinating relief efforts, reassuring the troops, and trying to make sense of the chaos. The soldiers, meanwhile, struggled to find their footing, to rediscover their sense of purpose, and to learn to live with the memories of what they had seen, what they had done, and what they had lost. As the weeks turned into months, the full extent of the devastation became clear. The war had left deep scars, not just on the landscape, but on the people, on their hearts, and on their minds. The survivors would carry the memories of that day with them for the rest of their lives, a constant reminder of the fragility of life, the brutality of war, and the importance of hope, of resilience, and of the human spirit. The world would never be the same, and as the survivors looked out upon the ruins, they knew that they would never forget the lessons they had learned in the fires of conflict. The aftermath of the battle was a time of reckoning, a time of reflection, and a time of healing. It was a time for the survivors to come to terms with their experiences, to find a way to move forward, and to learn to live with the memories of what they had endured. As they worked to rebuild, to recover, and to rediscover their sense of purpose, they knew that they would never forget the sacrifices they had made, the friends they had lost, and the lessons they had learned in the crucible of war. The war may have been lost, but the human spirit had emerged victorious, scarred but unbroken, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the dust settled on the battlefields of the world, the long-term geopolitical impact of the conflicts began to take shape. The rise and fall of empires, the redrawing of national borders, and the emergence of new global powers all contributed to a fundamentally altered international landscape. The aftermath of war had ushered in an era of unprecedented cooperation and competition, as nations sought to redefine their roles and interests in a rapidly changing world. In the decades that followed, the global community witnessed the formation of new international institutions, designed to promote diplomacy, prevent conflict, and foster economic cooperation. The United Nations, established in the wake of World War II, played a pivotal role in shaping the global agenda, as nations came together to address common challenges and promote collective security. The emergence of the European Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and other regional organizations further underscored the trend towards greater cooperation and integration. However, the post-war period also saw the rise of new tensions and rivalries, as nations with competing interests and ideologies jockeyed for position on the global stage. The Cold War, pitting the United States and its allies against the Soviet Union and its satellite states, dominated international relations for decades, with proxy wars, espionage, and propaganda campaigns fueling a climate of fear and mistrust. The demise of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a significant turning point, as the United States emerged as the world's sole superpower, but the rise of new challengers, including China, India, and Iran, have since introduced fresh complexities and uncertainties into the global equation. The legacy of war has also had a profound impact on national identity, cultural heritage, and societal values. The trauma and sacrifice endured during times of conflict have often been commemorated through monuments, memorials, and rituals, serving as poignant reminders of the human cost of war. The preservation of historical sites, museums, and archives has further ensured that the experiences and lessons of the past remain accessible to future generations, providing a foundation for informed decision-making and responsible leadership. In addition, the technological advancements and scientific discoveries spurred by military innovation have had far-reaching consequences for modern society. The development of radar, jet engines, and computer systems, for example, has revolutionized industries such as aviation, transportation, and telecommunications. The application of medical research and advances in fields like prosthetics, psychology, and neuroscience has improved the lives of countless individuals, while the exploration of space has expanded our understanding of the universe and inspired new generations of scientists and engineers. As we reflect on the complex and often contradictory legacy of war, it is essential to acknowledge the profound human cost of conflict, while also recognizing the transformative power of adversity to drive innovation, cooperation, and progress. The paradox of war, which can both destroy and create, reminds us that the pursuit of peace and security is an ongoing endeavor, requiring constant vigilance, diplomacy, and collective effort. In the face of an uncertain future, it is crucial that we learn from the lessons of history, embracing the complexities and nuances of the past, while striving to build a more just, equitable, and peaceful world. As we navigate the challenges of the 21st century, we would do well to heed the wisdom of the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who observed that, "War is the father of all, and the king of all, and some he has made gods and some men, some bond and some free." In this sense, the legacy of war serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring power of human agency, creativity, and resilience, even in the face of adversity and uncertainty. As we conclude this series, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, where we will continue to explore the complexities of military history, examining the ways in which conflict has shaped the world we live in today. By engaging with the past, we hope to inspire a deeper understanding of the present and a more informed approach to building a better future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the ages, and we look forward to sharing more stories, insights, and reflections with you in the future.